and welcome back to the AI Marketer's Playbook, where we cover actionable frameworks to help you leverage AI in business. I'm Audrey Chai, your host, and today I have with me someone really special, someone whom I deeply respect and admire, Jordan Wilson. Now, Jordan is an AI strategist and the founder and host of Everyday AI, one of the top media companies helping everyday professionals grow with AI through its daily live stream, podcast, and newsletter. He has also taught prompt engineering basics to thousands of people, from entrepreneurs and small business owners to Fortune 100 executives. Welcome to the show, Jordan. I'm so excited to have you.
Audrey, thank you for having me. I'm excited, talking about AI every day. If I can double down and go twice in a day, I'm so stoked. So thank you for having me on your show.
Wow. And I just wanted to say that you were actually the first person to invite me on an AI podcast. At that point in time, that was, I think, last year, I was really nervous. So I want to say a huge thank you for inviting me to be your guest and also inspiring this amazing journey that I've had so far.
Well, you're welcome. And clearly you have a knack for it, right? Yeah, it didn't go all that bad if it turned into your own show, right?
I hope so. We'll see about that. Yeah, but enough about me. I think what would be amazing, right, would be for you to share a bit of your journey with us. How you went from content writing and marketing all the way to launching your own AI business.
Yeah, for sure. I'll try to I'll try to be very short because it's actually a story that goes over multiple decades. But essentially, I've had three kind of distinct points in my career so far. So first, I spent about 8 years as a multimedia journalist. Then I worked about 10 years in nonprofit leadership. But at that nonprofit, we essentially just became an activation agency for Nike and Jordan brand. So I was doing, creative activations all throughout the country for the better half of a decade. And then that led me to start my own company, which turned into companies. So I started a digital strategy company. And then I kind of saw the writing on the wall in about 2020, just, the power of generative AI and large language models. I'm a software geek, so we were using the GPT technology very early on. And when I saw the power of these, even the GPT-3 technology, and saw what happens when you know how to properly work with it, that's when I decided to start my own AI media and consulting company, Everyday AI. So yeah, it's really been a culmination of like 20 plus years that I've been working in various, MarTech and comms industries that led me to where I'm at today.
It's like it's meant to be, right? It's almost like you were building the different skill sets for this magical moment and unlock that is amazing for a lot of us marketers, right? But I would also love to know, because you were one of the first movers in the AI space, right? How was it like in the beginning? Like, how did you get the information that you needed? How do you find the experts that you needed? Because it was so new to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, it was a little harder, right? Because yeah, I started a daily live stream and podcast around generative AI like 18 months ago. So, not every single person had even heard of, or even knew what a large language model was. So, early on, it was really just, finding other smart people such as yourself that were talking about generative AI early on in the days and reaching out to people. I mean, for myself, it was through a lot of early experimentation, right? So our team at, my other company called Accelerant Agency, we'd been using, large language models through different, third-party services on a daily basis since like late 2020. So a lot of our personal experience with these kind of earlier kind of GPT systems were through our day-to-day operations. And, it kind of, as I saw them personally both get more powerful, and as I personally learned and taught our team how to get more out of these models, that's just when I really shifted and said, well, I think the future of marketing is everything is going to be shifting to AI first, AI native. And that's when I really started to shift my companies and my personal focus on being AI everything or everyday AI.
Yeah, everything or every day, right? Or everything and every day, right? So yeah, that's awesome to hear. I think even for me, when I first, saw the power of ChatGPT, right? I knew that it was not going away. It was the moment where you're like, yep, this thing is super powerful. I cannot ignore it, and I have to learn how to leverage it, right? Which is why I think your podcast is so useful for everyone. And I would also love to understand, right? Because as AI evolves, your business also evolved, right? How did your business evolve or pivot over, the past year? Has it actually pivoted, or were you like dead set on doing like consulting and training for your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, kind of full disclosure, when I started this, I said, let me do this every day for a year, which is like wild, right? To talk about doing a daily live stream, a daily podcast, a daily newsletter every single day for a year. So, but I said, let me do this every day for a year before I worry about money, before I worry about clients, before I worry about, creating, business value, which is probably, terrible advice and a terrible way to run a business, if I'm being honest. But, I'm glad I did it, because if I would have made decisions based on, partnerships or money early on, I think I would have maybe, or we would have lost our way, and we would have started focusing on things that maybe weren't important. So to be able to work through literally 365 days of generative AI without being influenced by, oh, I need to do this for this client. And, there are plenty of opportunities that we just really didn't prioritize until we hit that year mark. And, so things have obviously changed in the last couple of months since that's happened.
For a lot of business owners who are in the AI space, we would have seen, different pockets of opportunity, right? But also finding the focus or knowing when to pivot and move out of something that isn't working is very important, especially in a field that's always changing, right? And I think I would also love to know, since you have had, so many guests on your show, 365 days, it's so insane, right? What are some of the key themes that you have noticed, recurring themes that your guests have also shared?
Yeah. So I mean there's the obvious, and then there's kind of the under the radar. Yeah. So, doing this over the last, I think we're at 17 months now, something like that. I mean, so some obvious ones, right? Generative AI is changing how we work, literally top to bottom. So, we don't cover one particular area of business or one niche, in the business world. So we really cover AI from all angles, all industries. So I'll say one common, well-known theme right now is generative AI is the future of work, right? And I think this depends on where you're located, right? So I'm in the US. There's like zero regulation. There's very few actual laws or anything like that. So implementation, I mean, it's been fast, it's been messy, but I don't think you can argue with the future of work is with generative AI at its core, right? The six largest companies in the US, which are, I believe, six out of the eight largest companies in the world, they've gone all in. They've gone all in on AI. So, your Microsoft, your Apple, your Meta, Nvidia, etc., right? So they really dictate how we all work. So whether, if you're still listening out there and you're still kind of quote unquote on the fence about generative AI, or if you're a business leader, and you're reluctant to, implement large language models in your business, I mean, you're asking to fail, because you don't get to make the rules, right?
Yeah.
The companies that dictate how we work, right? Microsoft, they dictate how we work. Apple, they dictate how we work. In many cases, Meta, Google, Alphabet, right? They dictate how we work. So you can't continue to play this non-generative AI game when the playing field is going generative AI. It's going AI first, AI native. So that would be probably one of the more obvious things that I've learned by talking to literally hundreds of the world's smartest people in AI. Maybe one of the non-obvious or more under the radar learnings that I've seen, it's just a lack of training and education. Companies, even the big tech trillionaire companies, I don't think are doing a great job, if I'm being honest, at training their employees top to bottom. Fortune 500 companies aren't doing, I mean, there are some that are doing a good job, and then there's some that aren't doing a great job. So that's what I would say is, two of my biggest findings from talking to a lot of smart people. And, there's really almost a juxtaposition there, right? When everyone's saying the future of work is AI, but very few people are investing in proper training and teaching employees.
Yeah, definitely. this is a lot of us in this AI space on LinkedIn or online, right? On Twitter, we are in a specific bubble. So the content that we see are all AI related content, but we don't realize that a lot of people out there beyond this bubble are still pretty new to ChatGPT. So interestingly, I also held a workshop recently. I thought that most of my participants would have had some experience with ChatGPT, and there was still a huge bunch of folks who haven't actually tested it, haven't actually downloaded it, haven't actually, tried it, which was really surprising. But it was also heartening to know that they were interested in taking up a skill because they recognize that it's important and it's the future, right? So I think that's something that we will take some time to transit into, but I think there will definitely be a need for training and consulting. And with that, I would also love to know, is there anything that or was there anything that surprised you during the podcast that you've had? Was there a moment where you're like, wow, I did not know this, or a super surprising fact that stuck with you?
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, you'd think after doing like 300 plus episodes, I would have a list of them, but I would actually say probably not. Very rarely, am I interviewing a guest and the guest says something that, I'm completely shocked by. I mean, part of it is, we do a decent amount of research, but like I said, probably again, the biggest thing that is technically shocking to me is, you have companies, like I said, Fortune 500 companies that are investing, six, seven, eight figures into their generative AI efforts and just aren't training their people. So to me, that's the biggest one is, companies I think if they move too early, they might have screwed themselves over a little bit. But companies that finally started to deeply invest in generative AI and fine tuning models based on their data, in 2024, like I said, companies it seemed like were fine, throwing six, seven, sometimes eight figures at this generative AI solution, but it's like they were investing pennies on the dollar in terms of teaching their hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employees how to actually use these systems that they were investing in. So I would say that was probably the only big, kind of takeaway or one of the biggest surprises that I guess I'm continually running into.
And based on what you have observed, right, why do you think this gap exists, right? So it seems like people know that there's potential, they're investing money, but yet there's still a gap between, management and everyone else, right? Do you think that it stems from, the way people work or function? Any insights around that?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Any insights? I mean, I could talk for like 3 hours just on this topic. I guess a couple main insights. One is very few people, aside from your, actual people who are building your AI systems, those with, deep learning, machine learning backgrounds, very few people actually understand large language models, right? Like there's this, sometimes they're called, a black box, and I think very few people actually explore like what happens under the hood, right? And it's really not difficult to understand large language models, right? You can, in a couple of hours of, exploring and reading, you can actually come to a great understanding of large language models. And I think when you come to that understanding and when you actually try to educate yourself a little bit, then I think you spend much less time on the back end trying to fix or improve outputs. And then you also spend less time on the front end, trying to strategize or build your generative AI solution if you actually understand how it works. So I think people have a false kind of sense of what a large language model is. And they think, oh, I need to be, someone with a deep learning background to really understand a large language model. And it's like, no, you don't, right? A couple of hours, again, and you will understand the basics, right? You're not going to be an expert in a couple of hours, but a couple of hours actually reading, understanding, going into, kind of the sandboxes or playgrounds that, OpenAI and Anthropic and Google set up, right? Going in there, once you understand it and going in there and playing yourself, I think is such an underutilized feature or aspect that so many people, especially marketers, but so many people should be doing that, right? It's super simple. It's essentially no code, low code. So anyone can go in and do this and explore and learn firsthand, and that's what you need to be doing.
Yeah, I love what you said about just doing it right and learning from the experience. And I think a lot of people don't realize that AI is basically a new skill set. And like with any other skill set, you got to put in the reps, put in the work, try and fail and experiment. And that's how you learn, right? And that's how you grow a lot faster. So going into the idea of like training and learning, right? How should someone get started if they are new to it? I know you also have, your ChatGPT foundations and basics for beginners. Would you like to tell us more a bit about that and also how you would recommend someone to get started?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I think, yeah, am I biased? Maybe, but also not, right? So, yeah, we've taught, I think now like 7,000 business leaders how to use ChatGPT, right? And it's through this understanding that I think you can also have a pretty good baseline of just large language models in general. So we do this usually like twice a week. It's free. There's no catch. It's live. It's not like a recorded webinar. And, Audrey, like one thing not kind of frustrated if I'm being honest, right? Like I get frustrated because people are out there on LinkedIn and Twitter and, they're pushing all of these, chat GPT, this and this. And I'm like, if I'm being honest, 90% of what I see out there, it's things that are incorrect. It's things that are ill research, like they're just not research, and it's just false, and it's just people are just pushing, I think a lot of times, like snake oil, right? We build this from scratch and we update it every single week, and it is free because I feel and maybe this is me really wanting businesses to succeed and kind of my nonprofit background, but there's not a lot of people, I think, out there that you can trust, right? And that, are they actually going out there and are they, testing things? Are they
Yes.
experimenting? Are they talking to experts, right? And that's literally all we do at Everyday AI. We go and we try to break things, right? We talk to the smartest people in the world. We test out all the models, and we don't just take what a company tells us to put out there, right? So that's why I think it's in like our classes, I think amazing, right? And we literally have people from, those same tech companies that I mentioned earlier, the largest companies in the world, that take our courses, right? And I get, testimonials all the time. People are like, I spent $2,000 or I spent a weekend, at this, chat GPT seminar or this large language model conference. And they're like, I learned more in your 90 minutes than I did at this paid thing, right? Because so many people, I think, are just worried about getting people into a sales funnel and selling them. And what I'm really trying to do is to flip that and to just provide value in free education, because I'm big on that, is, being able, maybe that's also my background as an investigative reporter, but to be able to investigate these large language models and simplify them and make it easy for the everyday person to understand and how they can actually start go and use these, AI models the correct way.
That's amazing to hear. And I think, like what you said, I do agree that there is quite a lot of content out there where it's really hard to apply whatever they're sharing. Let's just put it that way. And I think people who actually use AI in their everyday would realize that you can't just copy these frameworks or these prompts or this like cut and paste thing. You really have to figure out how do you blend your human expertise and AI execution to get like quality results. And again, that comes through putting in the work and experimenting and figuring it out. Or like what you said, attending your 90-minute webinar, which I'm sure is power packed with value. And with that, I would love to see if you could share something with our audience. How can they get started with, for example, ChatGPT?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I'd love to share that. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up my screen here. All right, so I'll try to do my best describing what this actually is. So this is our prime prompt polish course, right? So this is just one slide. There's probably, I don't know, 150 slides or something like that. So, take this with a grain of salt. This is just something in the middle, the good stuff. We're bringing the good stuff for Audrey. And, I rarely even talk about this on the podcast.
Well,
Yeah, this is just, some stuff that is really, I'd say part of our secret sauce. But so I'd say, Audrey, one of the biggest mistakes that people make inside ChatGPT is copy and paste prompts. If I'm being honest, they don't work. That's not how large language models are built. I know that's great for LinkedIn, and don't get me wrong, it's great to give people ideas on what large language models are capable of. But the best way to work with a large language model is iteratively. It's to have a conversation. It is to essentially train, right? So to train a chat, or to train, if you're building a GPT or a projects in Claude or a GEMS in Google Gemini, etc. But you really want to have a conversation with a model and to give it examples, right? So to get a little mathematical or scientific here, any study that you read, right? And I read these a lot. I spend my weekends, I'm a dork, reading a lot of papers that come out on different large language model benchmarks, different prompting methodologies across all these different large language models that, are getting updated, it seems like now weekly, right? And every single study shows the more essential shots that you have in a prompt, the better the output's going to be, regardless of the model, regardless if you're using, GPT-4o latest, or, Gemini 0826 or Claude 3.5 Sonnet. It doesn't matter what large language model that you're using. The prompting methodology stays the same. And that is, the more shots or the more iterative you're prompting, the better the results are going to be every single time. So what I'm showing here on the screen, this is our refine Q portion of priming, right? And essentially what this is, without accidentally talking for 30 minutes, this is essentially training a model. So you go through refine Q, stands for role, examples, fetch, insights, narrate, explain, and question. And I'll kind of read out the bottom. So question is, you do not ask for an output. You ask ChatGPT what questions it has. And this is essentially, right, people always rush, right? Like, if I'm being honest, like, human nature, you want to be as lazy as possible. And so I think when people are working with these large language models and you see how powerful they are and, oh, they're great, right? So you think, oh, I'm going to spend, 10 seconds and I'm going to get 10 hours of work. That's not the case, right? Like I said, I'm a huge advocate on working with large language models the correct way. And so this refine Q method here is essentially a step-by-step process where you have a conversation. So what happens after this is, before you are asking the model for an output. So let's say writing landing page copy for everyday AI. That's the example here, right? So at the very end of this long refine Q, we are not asking for landing page copy, right? We are essentially turning ChatGPT into a consultant. And what happens after this refine Q, which is part of our priming process, you essentially have a conversation with ChatGPT, and this sets off a string of essentially back and forth conversations. So in the same way that, if you hired, 100 new employees at a company, you would take them through a process. You would take them through an onboarding, a training, reinforcement learning, quizzing, knowledge retention. You would go through a process with these humans if you were to hire a bunch of humans. And that's essentially what the refine Q step in our priming of prime prompt polish, that's what we teach people to do. Because once you go through this, and yes, it can be a little bit time consuming. It can take, 15 to 30 minutes to go through our whole prime prompt polish process. But then at the end, you essentially have an expert, right? That is going to give you exponentially better outputs than if you were to just, drop in some long copy and paste prompt where you are immediately asking for an output. So I'd say that is, whether it's marketers, content writers, advertisers, people in communication, or anything, right? But people always rush to ask a model for an output when, generally you're probably going to be going back and forth at least a dozen or a few dozen times before you actually are asking for that output, whatever that output may be. So that's just a kind of long, drawn out way to kind of talk about what's on the screen here.
That's a super hot teaser you have for your course right there. If you guys don't already see the value, you're missing out. But yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jordan. I think what you said about, it's an iterative process, right? That's what people need to know. Because even for myself, when I'm prompting, I'm having that conversation, I'm giving it enough information. And your framework of Refine Q gives AI enough context to then have that frame of mind to solve a problem rather than you're just asking it to solve a problem without the right context, without the right framework, without the right examples, and you're going to get a not that great output.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, it just all, stems back to this, an example of a shot. So that's like an input output pairing, right? So you have to, through conversation, just like you would a student, right? You have to go through, train it up, give it an assignment, and teach it what's wrong. And yeah, it can, in theory, seem like counterintuitive to go through. And, you might think, oh, if I can just put a single prompt in and get something decent enough on the output, like why would I waste the time to go through this? Well, hey, for marketers out there listening, our audiences are getting drowned out by literally just C level, right? C plus maybe on a good day, right? But we're getting drowned out by C plus level content generated by large language models. So I mean, you can keep doing these, one shot or zero shot prompts, but your messaging is not going to resonate with your audience because personally, I'm tired of seeing so much content written by AI because even people who think, oh, if I just put this in my prompt, it's gonna sound like a human. No, it's not. And I think consumers are, getting a little smarter to starting to know how to tune out. Even if they aren't doing it intentionally, because we are just getting literally bombarded with this, average content. Now it's everywhere, right? You really have to take it a step further to stand out, not just in your content writing, but anything that you might be using a large language model for.
Definitely. And I think one thing I would love to add to that is I think as the world becomes more AI, being human is going to be even more important, right? Because your unique human voice, that perspective, the stories that you have that are uniquely yours, I think that as a writer or a marketer, these things are going to stand out. And even like for brands, right? Branding is going to be all like even more so important, especially when everyone's creating content at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you like humans need to spend more time conversing with models before you ask for an output, whatever that output is, right? Whether you're using it for marketing purposes, content writing, analysis, automation, whatever it is, right? You need to spend as much time as you can with these large language models having a conversation so it can better understand human tendencies, human nature, what makes humans tick, right? Because another thing that people don't talk about is these models are getting larger and larger. And, large language models are generative. They're not deterministic. So, you can run the same quote unquote prompt 100 times and get 90 different results. You can get 3 different results with variations, right? So, because the training data in these models is so large, there's a lot of just bad, garbage, low quality data that ends up in these training models. Yes, smart humans do a pretty good job of weeding out the bad information and training the models on the good information, but it's not always going to be 100%, which is why I think right now we are in an epidemic of subpar marketing because people don't really pay enough attention or go through the proper process of learning the models, and they're just fine with putting more C plus content out there, right? Oh, before we could only get, 2 articles or 3 social media posts a week. And now they're like, oh, now we can do 20 articles and 50 social media posts a week. Well, it's like, are you doing anything if all you're doing is putting out more subpar content?
Yeah. And then the idea of quality versus quantity. So again, like is one or two quality pieces better than just 10 not that great, pieces? That is something that's a food for thought for people, right? And with that also, do you have any hot secret tips that you have for using ChatGPT or AI that you personally love? I'm sure you have
Yeah.
a couple in your pocket.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't have any short tips and tricks, right? Because my process is very in depth. It is very detailed and thorough. One thing that I will say, a kind of hot tip, and it's not necessarily chat GPT related, but kind of, right? But I'll say for small tasks, make as many custom GPTs as you can, right? I think people miss the mark when it comes to, whether we're talking, custom GPTs from OpenAI, ChatGPT, or whether we're talking about projects from Claude, or whether we're talking about gems from Google. I think people try to stuff too much into these, kind of mini or personalized or bespoke AI systems, right? And they try to, really do very complex multi-step tasks. So I'll say break it down, right? Especially with GPTs inside of ChatGPT, the fact that you can reference or at mention multiple GPTs in the same window under the same context window, right? Like that's huge. That's something I think, ChatGPT still has an advantage. I don't see how, Gemini and Claude can't be implementing this feature in the near future. It's too powerful, right? But when you think of those tasks, whatever you're doing, whether it's in marketing, ideation, brainstorming, automation, whatever it is, if you can just take those down and break them into very bite-sized chunks and then go through kind of like a process like I just had up on screen for each of those chunks and then turn them into GPTs, right? Like that is a huge hack. I think GPTs, when they were first announced in November, there was a lot of fanfare, but then that fanfare I think kind of waned because I think, again, because of stuff that gets shared on social media, people think, oh, I just need to get a longer prompt or I need to get longer system instructions into ChatGPT. And it's like, no, that's literally not how it works. I don't know why people want to argue with math and science. It's irrefutable, right? So have a conversation, break it down into smaller chunks. That's why, in theory, chain of thought prompting is always more effective, right? So when you break something down step by step, not only is that the correct prompting methodology, but that's even the best methodology for when you want to, get into kind of the beginner of a more agentic workflow or working, with multiple bespoke versions of these models is you need to break it up into smaller, thought, think chain of thought, think of, what's that process that you go through all the time? Break that out into small chunks and build a GPT around each of those chunks.
Yeah. So like what you said, right? Stepping back from your own workflows and then figuring out what is your thought process, what is your workflow, and then actually spending time building out, the AI systems or the AI prompt frameworks that you personally will use for each step and not being afraid to try and fail during this process is extremely important. I have a feeling a lot of people think that AI is a shortcut, right? So they're thinking, hey, I just want to see results. But they also don't realize the work that has to go in order for you to see those magical results that are of high quality. Yeah, and also Jordan, I think one interesting thing I would love to have a chat with you about is your journey of entrepreneurship. So I know it's everyday AI, right? How have you managed to stay consistent every single day of the year? It's insane. Like you have to have so much grit and determination to make it happen, right? Can you talk us through that process?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it is I found myself before I started Everyday AI spending more and more time exploring ways to use AI to improve my other company's workflow, to improve outputs for our clients. And yeah, I kind of referenced this earlier, but I came to a realization that number one, very early on, I noticed because I have a background in, marketing and communications, I noticed that generative AI was going to really flip the business landscape and change how we all work. So part of it was I didn't want to personally get left behind. The other part is I felt there weren't a lot of good resources for kind of everyday people, if that makes sense, right? I fancy myself a little bit of a dork, sure. But, I didn't, up until that point, I didn't have a deep learning background. I didn't have a machine learning background in, 2020. I've done since, I've done, executive education, certifications, all of that to, kind of still get the academic side, under my belt. But, practice, right? Like there's this saying that you haven't learned something until you can teach something. And, now we're, teaching, hundreds of thousands of people, through the podcast, right? So I knew even for myself personally, for my companies, that we weren't going to be able to keep up and help clients and, help those companies that we were, doing AI strategy for. We weren't going to be able to help and give them actual good advice and to steer them in a correct direction unless we were practitioners, right? So that's why we do this literally every single day, right? And that's why I can, sit in, a room of people that like from books or certification or kind of some of those perspectives, they might be smarter than me, right? But I can keep up and I can speak the language because I'm practicing it literally every single day, right? It's like if you're trying to learn a new language, like the best way to do it is through immersion, right? It's much better than, oh, once a week I'm going to read a textbook or once a week I'm going to, practice my Spanish. No, it's better if you immerse yourself in it every single day. And if it becomes a part of who you are, how you think, how you work, right? So that's a decision that I made, multiple years ago. And yeah, so doing it every single day has become a habit, but it's also become really the foundation for how I work and how I think.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think it also shows a lot of your internal like belief systems and values, right? That ability to learn and then that want and desire to share that knowledge is also really beautiful to see. And I think so many of us, including myself, have learned so much from your show. I know of many creators who are like, did you hear his podcast? It's amazing. So we are all like this is a really great show. So thank you for the work that you've been putting in. I think it has been amazing for so many of us in the business of your show. And with that, could you tell us a little bit more about Everyday AI, what you guys do, and where people can find you?
Yeah, no, and thank you for those kind words, Audrey. That means a lot. So yeah, I'd say Everyday AI, it is the best place to come and learn AI for free, right? Unbiased as well, right? Because yeah, companies put out great trainings and free certifications, but a lot of it is like, oh, well, you do this and you come learn our model, right? You learn our software, you get into our infrastructure. So Everyday AI, we're different, right? We teach and we talk about all the different AI systems. Yeah. Do we have a lean toward Chat GPT? Sure, a little bit, because that's probably more popular than the other, the next like 8 generative AI systems combined, right? But we teach everything. So it's a one place through our daily live stream, right? So to come on and be able to ask, experts from, Microsoft or Amazon or IBM, to be able to ask them questions and get answers in real time, I think that's huge, right? And that's why, we really are education focused in teaching people the right way and having answers and tackling tough subjects like ethics and governance, right? But doing it hopefully in a fun way. So, please join us. Yeah, we do it, the live stream, and that goes out on a podcast every single day. And then in a newsletter every single day that's free as well. So yeah, that's a big thing, is just giving everyone free access to unbiased AI education that you can learn it, you can put it into practice and grow your company and grow your career. So that's what we're about at Everyday AI. So yeah, you can join us on LinkedIn, YouTube, just looking up Everyday AI, or just go to everydayai.com and go listen to the podcast with Audrey. It was great. Go type her name in there. You can, I'm sure she dropped some secrets on our podcast that maybe she hasn't even talked about with ours. So yeah, we've had, hundreds of great guests like Audrey. So you can go in and literally, like, if you want to learn about marketing, you can just type in marketing in the search bar. And literally we've talked to, the marketing director at NVIDIA, the director of digital marketer, right? The president of digital marketer, right? Like, so no matter what you are trying to learn, you can literally just go to our website, type it in, and there's probably dozens of in-depth, high quality episodes, resources, emails you can go back and read. It's all there. It's just a huge free generative AI university.
That is mega. And if I were you, I'm not going to miss this, okay? So please do so. Check out Everyday AI. And thank you again, Jordan, for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on the show. And thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and hit the bell for more actionable marketing insights. See you next time.